This is Lois Whaley for Women Today and Yesterday. My guest today is an Ohio University student, Meghan Shamblen. Hi, Meghan.
Hi, happy to be here.
Oh, so glad you could come. We met just last week, actually, at the Emeriti Luncheon.
Right.
What were you doing there?
I was photographing the new inductees and kind of the atmosphere, just more natural shots of what was going on, the delicious food.
Yes. Well, that's really nice. So you do, you work at a university office then?
Right. I work for the Ohio University Alumni Association.
Okay.
And so it's a variety of things that are happening on campus, different items for their Bobcat store, and then different events and things like that. So I'll be photographing homecoming coming up shortly.
Homecoming, upcoming, yes.
Right.
Just a couple of weeks from now, isn't it?
Yeah, mid-October, I believe.
Mid-October, right. Well, that's always an exciting time for the alumni who get to come home and,
Yeah.
and see what's new on campus, and there's almost always something new to see.
Right. Well, I actually know people who graduated last year who still return weekends or whenever they just can't stay away.
Right, they're true Bobcats, that's for sure. They come back many weekends, even though they've moved away. Some people just never move away, as far as that's
I
concerned.
guess not.
Yeah. Well, I want to show you a picture here. This is a photograph. This is my only claim to fame as a photographer. What do you think it is?
It's definitely a landscape,
Definitely a landscape.
but I can't quite place where exactly.
Yeah, what kind of a landscape? Well, as a matter of fact, I think this is going to be shown on the screen. This is a landscape from California. No, we're at the wrong end, folks. This is, the picture that I'm showing is like this, okay? And that's surely on there. There we go, okay. Well, this is California, and this picture was taken at the top of Mount Diablo
Oh,
at sunset time.
I can tell there's a nice gradient going right there.
Yes, yes. And you can see it's, this is the outline of Mount Diablo, its shadow.
Oh, that's awesome.
See, the setting sun was behind me.
Yeah.
And so this is the
Wow.
shadow, which goes, of course, to the east, points to the east.
Right.
And then this red thing down in the corner, I think has something to do with the fact that it's called Mount Diablo, in that that's called the Devil's Elbow. It's a red outcropping of rock
Oh.
very close to the top of Mount Diablo. And so right up here on this very, very peak, that's where I'm standing to make the picture. And of course, this is a barrier, a stone barrier to keep from falling down the mountain, which would not be too good to fall down Mount Diablo. Actually, it's an important landmark in the state of California because they use Mount Diablo as a starting point to lay out map grids. They've done it for generations, and but it has a particular, in my own time, it has a particular importance because my grandfather and grandmother had a little ranch, which is now Little Vineyard, about 80 miles away from Mount Diablo.
And which part of California is this in?
Well, it's near San Francisco. Mount Diablo is not on the side where San Francisco is, but on the other side, near Berkeley and Lafayette, where my great-grandfather lived, and Walnut Creek, and some places like that are not as well known as San Francisco.
Yeah.
But in fact, that particular day, I took my grandson, Michael Robert, this must be at least 10 years old because he was just a little guy then, and he's a senior now at the University of California, Berkeley. So it's been a while since I visited Mount Diablo with my grandson. I guess I should just put this down over here and
We'll have to
go
visit
on
sometime.
talking about, today is September 23rd, and that means that I'll be talking about some people, about a woman who was born on September 23rd. But first I'm going to talk about some other women who were born almost on September 23rd. Let's see. Well, this is the first one. This book, the Book of the City of Ladies, which should appear there in a minute on the screen, was published. It was really the first feminist tract in Western civilization history. Christine de Pizan published that book back in 1405.
Wow.
You must have the Book of the City of Ladies there somewhere. The Book of City of the Ladies. 1405 she published that book, and it well, I'm afraid that I've probably messed Matt up, because there we go. There's the Book of the City of the Ladies. And you can see that this is actually an illustration from one of the copies of Book of Cities of the Ladies. And you see they're busily building here. She's got a trowel, and
Yeah.
they've got masonry work here and stones, and they're actually building a City of the Ladies, according to this. Christine de Pizan is her name, and as I say, she was born on September 21st in Venice, Italy, in 1365, a very long time ago. But she was an educated woman, and there weren't very many educated women in her day. In fact, there was sort of a prejudice against even teaching some women to read and write back in that time. But her father was a enlightened man, I guess we should say, and so she was educated and could speak both Italian and French, because he moved from Italy when she was just a small child to France in order to work in the court of Charles V of France. And of course she moved with him and later married a courtier in the court of Charles V. But unfortunately her husband died young. He was 10 years older than she was, and she was only 25 when he died. And she had 3 children to raise, and a mother and a niece. And her father had already passed away too, so she couldn't depend on family, you know. So she became a writer, and she was probably the first professional woman writer in Western civilization. Christine de Pizan, born on September 21st in the year way back, 1365. And the Book of the City of Ladies. You know, there are a lot of men who are misogynists. That's a fancy word meaning they don't like women.
Yeah.
Right. So she decided that she would write a book about all the wonderful women in history that
Why
she
not?
knew of way back in 1405, you know. So there are not a lot of women in my book here,
Yeah.
which is Remember the Ladies. by Kirsten Olsen that date that far back
Yeah.
to 1365 or 1405, but she wrote mostly about women in the Bible and women in mythology. And some of the things she was always emphasizing that they were beautiful and chaste and loyal. And, where do the men get all this misogyny from? So it's interesting. And in fact, some of the things she has to say are really funny because, have you heard of Medusa?
Yeah.
Okay.
The snake
With the
hairs.
snake hair?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she turned people to stone, right? In fact, one of the great heroes of Greek mythology tracked her down to her cave, cut off her head, and put it on his shield so that men would see it on his shield and either turn to stone or be so surprised that he'd have a chance to smack him with his sword. But it's very interesting what she says about Medusa.
What does she say?
She says that Medusa was actually a very beautiful princess, and she had golden hair, curly golden hair,
Yeah.
and people used to be so dumbstruck when they saw her and her great beauty that they would stand still and look at her. And that was the origin of this myth that she turned people to stone. Isn't that strange?
That's really peculiar, actually.
Well, I thought it was really fascinating to read what she had to say about Medusa.
Yeah, I never would have thought about it that way.
No, indeed. But she wrote about many other famous women of antiquity and wonderful things they did, and they almost always were beautiful, chaste, loyal to their husbands, even ones who were married to ancient men, they were still loyal to their husbands. So she really stood up for the women in her day, Christine de Pizan. And September 21st is her birthday.
What's her birthday? 3 days ago.
Yeah. Well, the next one is someone from my book here, Remember the Ladies. And this was a famous quote from Abigail Adams. Abigail Adams wrote her husband, John Adams, who was working on the Declaration of Independence,
Right.
and said, "Remember the ladies, and don't be as mean to them as men sometimes are." She didn't quite put it that way, but that's what she meant.
We're talking about the Constitution in my political science class.
Oh,
and
really?
My professor actually mentioned that as well. So
Oh, he did.
he did. Remember the ladies. Good.
That's a famous quote from Abigail Adams, and she wrote many letters to John because he was always so busy. He was in England for years at a time, and so on. And during the Revolution, he was away. Like I say, he was in Philadelphia, and their home was Massachusetts. So she had to sort of keep things going at home,
Yeah.
keep the home fires burning while John was busy. But there's another picture here, and this is of a woman whose birthday is September 22nd. Her name is Christabel Pankhurst, and I hope we're going to see a picture of her in just a minute. Christabel Pankhurst was from yes, there she is, was from a famous group of women. Her mother, Mrs. Pankhurst, was a big proponent of women's rights, especially the right to vote, and she lived in England. And Christabel, of course, was born and raised in England, and like her mother, she was a big proponent of votes for women, and actually women in England got the vote before women in the United States, as a whole got it in 1920. So Christabel Pankhurst was certainly a famous woman who was a suffragette, sometimes called. And I've been doing a series of programs on women's rights. And so I thought it was particularly interesting that Christabel Pankhurst was practically on our own day, you know, the 22nd of September, her birthday. Then I want to mention that today is September 23rd, as we said before, and the woman for September 23rd is Victoria Woodhull. Have you ever heard of Victoria Woodhull?
I have not.
Well, she was quite a gal. I mean, she was really, really something. She was born in Licking County, which is just quite nearby, you know. It's just east of Franklin County, where Columbus is. And she was born in a little town called Homer in 1838. And she was one of these quite beautiful women. Mm-hmm. We don't have a picture of her, but I'm showing Meghan this account of Victoria Claflin Woodhull, born in 1838 on September 23rd. And interestingly, to me anyway, this morning I was at the Quilt Revolution show at the Dairy Barn. And this is a book which I think will be shown here in a minute. Quilt Revolution. Yes, Quilt Revolution is the new show at the Dairy Barn Cultural Arts Center. Mm-hmm. I'm wearing a t-shirt from long ago, actually. Let's see, I think it says here. Can you see when it was first printed?
No.
It's over there
19,
somewhere.
it's right there.
Yeah.
By your finger. 1999?
1999, yes. This was a Dairy Barn t-shirt in 1999. One of the quilts must have had this tulips on it, because that's what it shows. But you see on the back it identifies.
Yeah.
Dairy Barn.
Right.
And the Dairy Barn is celebrating its 100th anniversary because it was built in 1914. And of course it's been a place where you can see fine art and especially quilts. Mm-hmm. They have quilts there right now, and the quilts that are there now are a special. You see, it started in 1979. Quilt National began in 1979. So it's the 35th anniversary year in 2014. And what they have here, this is their logo, actually, looks like this. They've got a pin that looks like this, just a little tiny pin, looks like that. But what they're showing here are quilts made by the jurors. Quilt National's held every 2 years. The first one was in 1979. The most recent one was in 2013. And there will be another Quilt National next year in 2015. So these people were all jurors who selected the 80 quilts that they have on each one of the Quilt Nationals. And so they are showing 3 quilts by certain of these jurors who were actual quilt makers themselves. Art quilts, these are not the kind that I remember. You know?
Yeah.
Do you have any quilts at home?
My mom made a lot in the past
she?
that we have around the house.
Wonderful.
And then when I was a kid, I'm not sure how old, my mom decided like we should make a quilt together, but I wanted the like patches to mean different things, but they were just random bits of fabric that she like would bring home from the store, and so we would just cut patterns out of them and make it.
Right. So they weren't necessarily tied to something that you
No.
remembered. Yeah.
Well, actually, I think we have one blanket at my house right now that's a quilt, but it's made out of T-shirts, so I think
Oh,
you would really
really?
like that.
Yes.
It's one of my roommates. They just took a bunch of different graphic T-shirts and cut them into patterns and sewed it into a quilt.
Oh, wonderful. Is it a really big quilt, or is it more of a throw, or is it more of a quilt you'd put on a bed?
It's sitting on a couch right now, but I'm pretty sure when it gets a little colder, people do use it in the house.
So is it in your house right now?
Yes.
Oh,
it
wonderful.
is. I think my mom wants to make me one because I have a lot of T-shirts from the past, and so she wants to do something like that for me.
Yes, well, that, when we first met last Thursday, you noticed my necklace that I was wearing, and the fact that my necklace, which I never wear on the show because it would be too jangly, but my necklace tells the story of my life. And so it has lots and lots of charms on it. I began it in 1967.
Wow.
And there it is. Yeah. You want to ask me about any of them? What?
I would love to. What does Gemini the twins diversity mean?
Yes, well, that is my birth sign
Your
is
stars.
Gemini. Actually, I'm right on the end of Gemini because my birthday is June 20th, and that's the last day of Gemini. June 21st is, I believe, Cancer rather than Gemini, and those are,
Yeah.
things in the constellations.
What do the twins
Yeah.
mean?
So that's the one that gives my birthday.
Yeah. Okay.
Meghan is taking a look at some of my other charms.
Yeah. San Francisco Prism.
That's one that has some printing on the back, doesn't it?
Prism, and then San Francisco.
Oh, yeah. No, that's that one is San Francisco. You see, there's cable car.
Yeah,
Cable car. Have you ever been out west?
I have, but I've only been to Lower California, so I went to
Southern California.
San Diego
San Diego.
and Los Angeles.
I had an aunt who lived in San Diego, so I have been out there.
Yeah, it's
That's a beautiful place. It's wonderful weather all the time.
Well,
Really?
when I went,
When you went?
it was the June gloom, which
Oh,
they have
really?
during the summer, so it wasn't as beautiful as I was anticipating for my first time in California.
Right. Well, if you'd gone in December, you would have, or January, you would have probably seen great weather in San Diego.
Yeah.
But there are some others there.
There was another one that I saw. I'm curious about the crowns.
Those
that
round
say-
ones. Well, those are the originals
Before.
on the bracelet. I tell you, I found that a bracelet in a place where I appropriated it. It was on a train in Europe
Yeah.
in 1967, and someone had left it in the ladies' room.
Oh.
Yeah. So I appropriated it, and those are actually little farthings from European countries. Most of them, I think, are,
10.
well, there are some from the Netherlands and there are some from Sweden,
Ooh.
but they are farthing coins, which they don't use anymore, really.
Right.
They're because they're only a quarter of a cent. A farthing is a quarter of a cent.
Yeah, most
So-
European countries have the euro now. I believe,
Yes.
Too.
So there are a number of. That's a little bell. That's from that same summer, from 1967, My husband was doing research at Freiburg in southern Germany, and with my 2 sons, who were at that time 5 and 7, I believe, or 6 and 8, as the case may be, were with us. And the older boy went to camp. He went to scout camp for a week. And during that week, I took the younger boy, who now still lives in Athens. His name is David Whaley. He works at College Bookstore. I took him to southern France, across the Rhine River, in Alsace, which is actually the German-speaking part of France. And I saw that charm. It was there's a mountain there, and that charm was to commemorate that trip to southern Germany. Formerly Germany. Actually, in 1871, there was a war between France and Germany, and the Germans won. And so they took German-speaking Alsace, and also north of it, Lorraine, which was the birth home of Joan of Arc. They took those 2 parts of France for Germany, and it was German until the end of World War I, when the victorious French took both those places back.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So,
do you have a charm to commemorate Mount Diablo?
No. I've got a picture of Mount Diablo.
You should get a charm for Mount Diablo.
I don't know if there's one that is for a mountain or not. Now that's a steamboat. It looks. It doesn't have. Yeah, it has a wheel, a steam wheel. Well, that commemorates the fact that I was once on the Ohio River Valley Water Sanitation Commission, which is an interstate compact of the Ohio River states, the ones that are on the main stem, because the Ohio River begins at Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania and goes 981 miles down to Cairo, Illinois, where it joins the Mississippi. And so that's to commemorate the fact that I was on the Ohio River Valley Water Sanitation Commission Public Interest Advisory Committee.
What a mouthful.
Yeah, wasn't that a mouthful? That's why they call it ORSANCO.
Acronyms are the best.
Yes. And there are some states there where I've lived, and then there are ones that are for the children.
Right,
This
I
is
saw
one
the
of mine.
silhouettes.
I'm not sure whether that's Dick or David, but
It's an RWW.
RWW, that would be our oldest son, Richard William Whaley. He lives in Ann Arbor.
And then this one's
And that's the one for
AA.
our daughter Alice, I believe, yes. And then the little ones, there are some little heads there, and those are for grandchildren.
Ah, gotcha.
So there are, they all mean something
Of
to me, in my life. And this is one that people often ask about.
What is
That's
it?
That's a roulette wheel.
Oh, Lady Luck here.
Well, and it commemorates the fact that I was raised in Nevada, where gambling has been legal since the early 1930s, and a lot of people go out there and lose some money, mostly lose money, otherwise the people wouldn't be in business.
Right. What is this blue kind of shimmery?
That was, unfortunately, I have often lost earrings, and I lost the other earring for that. But that was a set of earrings that my husband gave me, actually.
Oh.
And so when I had only one left, I said, well, I'll put it on my necklace, and that's what I did. And this one is similar.
Yeah.
An uncle
Gorgeous.
gave me those from Cuba, and I lost one, so
Oh.
there's the other one.
How did you meet your husband?
Well, my husband and I were both students at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. That was in 1953. And we met in 1954, which is 60 years ago.
Yeah.
And we were married on July 2nd, 1954. So we just celebrated our 60th wedding anniversary this summer. And our 3 children were able to be here. So
Congratulations.
that was really nice, really
Yeah.
nice. How about your folks? How long have they been married?
I believe they just celebrated in August. I'm not sure the exact number, but it's in the 20s.
In the 20s, sure. Yeah.
But they met when they were kids. They both went to the same church and the same school. It was
Oh,
kind of a small
yes.
community.
Uh-huh.
And so both of their families knew each other. And I think they started dating when they were in the 10th grade or somewhere around there. And then they went to college and they broke up. And then my dad made a valiant effort to win her back. And I hear this story from my uncle about how he used to have my mom's picture by his bedside, and they shared a room, so he always had to see it. And I guess he gave my uncle like the wedding ring because I think he proposed at the airport, and he always tells me like your dad was like not messing around. He's like, you better not lose that ring. That's very important.
Wedding rings are very important.
Yes.
This wedding ring was worn by my mother.
Oh.
She had very small fingers, as you
I
can
know.
tell. Yeah.
No way.
No way. I don't know that I could even get it on my little finger. I probably
Pinky.
couldn't get it on my little finger even.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think maybe you could.
Pinky ring.
Right, but you know, like I say, it's definitely times of my life that I remember. Well, I think maybe we ought to take a look at some other things here.
Okay.
To profiles of Ohio women. This is the one that I was mentioning before. Victoria Claflin Woodhull. September 23rd was her birthday.
Right.
Today, in fact. She was born in 1838, so that makes her, whatever. You know, I can't do the math that quickly, but she was born, as I said, in Homer in Licking County, Ohio. And her father was actually a sort of a snake oil salesman. And he brought his family up to help out, you know. And so she was a spiritualist, which was quite popular back then. And she and her sister became the first women stockbrokers on Wall Street.
Wow.
Back in 1868, I believe. They sort of got in the good graces of Cornelius Vanderbilt, who was a well-known millionaire back then and stockbroker himself. And he backed them to start a brokerage house, which they did. And probably just the differentness of it, you know, the fact that they were the first women. In their first several years of operation, they said, about half a million dollars, which was a lot of money back in the 1860s. So Victoria Claflin Woodhull had quite an interesting life. Besides being the first woman stockbroker, she was the first woman to run for President of the United States.
Really?
Yeah. Back in 1872, and she was running against another Ohioan, namely General Ulysses Grant, who of course won the election.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because one of the things was that she wasn't old enough to be president.
How old was she?
She was 34, and you have to be 35 to be president. But that didn't seem to stop her from throwing her hat in the ring and so on. And she was also the first woman to speak before a congressional committee. She spoke in favor of votes for women to a congressional committee in 1871. So she was definitely a pioneer in her time. And she was a pioneer in the way she lived, too, because it was pointed out, and you know, if people run for office, they can expect that folks who don't like them will find out about all the things they don't necessarily want other folks to know about, you know. So they found out quite a bit about Victoria, you know, namely things like she had been a spiritualist and a snake oil salesman when she was young, and all these different things. She never stood a chance. But eventually she moved to England, and she married a retired banker, and she lived on to be until 1927. She had quite a long life, almost 90 years. Victoria Claflin Woodhull, whose birthday is today, 23rd of September. And when I went to the dairy barn, I saw a friend of mine who was there. We had a tour of the new quilts that are in honor of the people who were jurors at each of the Quilt Nationals since 1979. And one of them was Carol Cure. And I should have remembered that I needed to say happy birthday to her, because today is Carol Cure's birthday, September 23rd. She's retired from Rural Action, which does a lot of work in southeast Ohio, especially in environmental concerns and community activism and so on. And she more or less invented rural action back about in the 1990s. And so here's a woman of today that we should remember for September 23rd, namely Carol Cure also. Well, one other thing I wanted to mention is a woman from the next day, tomorrow, September 24th. And this, they don't have a picture of this, but I want to show you a book about her. Her name was Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, and she is in the Ohio Women's Hall of Fame. I was the person who proposed her name for the Ohio Women's Hall of Fame. She just barely makes the cut because you have to have lived at least 5 years in Ohio. And she married her husband, Fenton Harper, in 1861. And all during the Civil War, she was a farm wife near Columbus. As you can tell, she's a black woman. She was born a free black in Baltimore, Maryland. And after the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act in the 1850s, bad people would grab free blacks and sell them into slavery in the South, which was something that happened during the 1850s. And so she couldn't go home to Baltimore because Maryland was a slave state, of course, in those days, and there were people out trying to catch blacks, whether they were free or not, and sell them down south into slavery. But she was an author who wrote poetry and spoke a lot. She spoke in favor of women's rights and, of course, for abolition of slavery in the 1850s. And then she was still alive during the Civil War. As I mentioned, she lived in Ohio during that time, and her daughter, her only child, was born in Ohio. But Later, she moved to other places around. And of course, she was able to go back to Maryland after the Civil War.
Yeah.
And she took a big trip around the South after the Civil War and spoke to groups of black people, encouraging them the men to vote, and of course the women and men to learn to read and write, because of slavery prohibited in many states. It prohibited slave owners from teaching slaves to read and write, because it was thought, well, if they knew how to read and write, maybe they'd get organized and do something against slavery. But I have from being in the Ohio Women's Hall of Fame, there's a little crystal memento, I guess you would say, which has her name carved on it, and the year that she was inducted into the Women's Hall of Fame in Ohio in 2011, and that's in the women's room here at Baker Center. There's a room back sort of on the top floor that's the Women's Center. Mm-hmm. And Susanna Dietzel, Dr. Dietzel, who's the woman in charge there, is a specialist on Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. A wonderful coincidence, a connection between this woman and someone who lives today right here in Athens, Ohio. So, how did you first get interested in photography, Meghan?
I guess I've always been a very visual person. It's how I comprehend things and how I organize them and things like that. And so I believe I got my first camera when I was 11 maybe, and it was just something that I brought around everywhere. I took pictures of everything, much to people's annoyance. I was always in their face taking pictures. And then when I got a little older, I really wanted to invest in like a nice camera. Mm-hmm. And my high school offered a program that kind of started early using film photography, developing it in the darkroom, and then transitioning to more like modern technology and where photography has come to today.
That's true. It's quite different now, isn't it?
Yeah.
You don't have to go into a dark room, really.
Right. I liked the dark room sometimes, though. It was nice to... you would feel proud when you would shoot a whole roll of film and you wouldn't know what was on it or what to expect. It's not like you could take a picture and be like, that looks nice.
Yeah, that's true. Nowadays you can look instantly at what's on the camera, can't you?
So it was very satisfying, especially when you had to like hand roll the film onto a thing and develop the film itself and then do the individual pictures. So that was very cool to do. And then I decided I still wanted to pursue photography after I graduated high school, and so I knew that OU had a really nice journalism school, but I didn't know they also had a very good visual communication school. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm here.
I see. Do you know Daniel Williams? Dan Williams? He's retired now, actually.
Do not.
He's a black gentleman, originally from California. They moved here, I think, about 1970, he and his wife, Sheila, and they've both worked at Ohio University, and I believe he was working in photography before his retirement here. Dan Williams. I think I've got the name right. That's an interesting connection, because when Dan Williams moved here about 1970, he had a big old van, a real old van from like about 1950 or so, and really huge. Well, my husband ran for Congress in 1972.
Wow.
And Dan Williams volunteered his van through mutual friends, to be a Whaley wagon, and it was painted up for my husband I remember we went to the Jackson Apple Festival. It was just about this time of year, actually, over in Jackson, Ohio, because that was part of the 10th district in those days for the Congress. So I'll never forget Dan Williams and the Whaley Wagon.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, it was. It was very interesting because it was the whole year of 1972 we were involved because there was a primary election in the spring, and Bob happened to win that, and then he went on, of course, to run. He was a Democrat, and he ran against the incumbent Republican Congressman Clarence Miller from Fairfield County, Lancaster, who actually was congressman for a very long time. He defeated Democrat after Democrat, who gave it a try until the 1990s. And then there was redistricting, and he was put into a district that happened to be another Republican congressman. So they had to run against each other, and Clarence Miller lost by about 1,000 votes because his other fellow had part of Dayton in his territory by then. The 10th district stretched over toward Dayton in those days. And so Clarence Miller lost, but if he had won, I think he would have gone on to be a congressman till he wanted to give up.
Yeah.
And actually, former Governor Strickland was our congressman, a Democratic congressman in that district, following he defeated the guy from Dayton who defeated Clarence Miller, actually. So politics is a very involved and interesting topic, that's for sure. Let's see, I think there was at least one more picture that we had here. In addition to noticing my necklace, you also noticed my hair. And this is a picture of me as a little girl. Rather flattering, I think. Yeah, there's a close-up of it. But you can see in this picture I have braids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You stuck true to them.
Yeah. This is, like I say, rather flattering. And actually, when I was that age, I was about, I would say, 8 at that time, growing up in Nevada. I'm sitting on a beautiful carved chest that my mother had from the time that she lived in Mexico. That was before I was born. But she lived in Mexico for 3 years, and she had this gorgeous carved chest from cedar chest from Mexico, and there I am seated on it, holding a doll. But by the time I was 8, I would probably be more likely to be holding a book because I was a great reader. And
who drew this?
This was done by a friend of my mother's, a woman named Jean DeBrovo, who lived in Nevada at the time. And she was visiting my mother and my mother's house, and got me to sit on the chest and hold this doll, and she took this pencil sketch of me at that time.
How'd she get you to sit still that long?
Probably 1940, I think.
Yeah.
I would have been 8 in 1940.
It's very nice.
I was the only girl in my 8th grade graduating class who still had long braids.
Oh.
So it's sort of traditional with me. I've had short hair at various times in the past, but mostly long hair ever since college, because I decided that I wanted to have my hair either very short or very long, because I think it's easier that way.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. I see you wear yours rather long.
Yeah, it was a little bit longer, but I got it cut.
I see. Oh, yeah.
But I like low maintenance, and I just let it grow.
Uh-huh.
So.
Well, mine is longer than you'd think. It reaches down below my waist. And at one time I could almost sit on it. But now that I'm 82, it's getting thinner and thinner. You know, I've got to hold on to what I've got.
Yeah.
Not so much left anymore. But I don't wash my hair very often because I find that it's pretty frizzy when it's first washed, you know, and so I like to have it naturally sort of lie down with a little oil in it.
Yeah.
So I only wash it about every 3 weeks or so. And and I only have one braid because that's easier than two.
Yeah.
It's easier than two braids.
That's
So.
very true.
Actually, my mother-in-law had long hair, which she wore in a braid around her head and also a sort of a little knot in the back. So she did two braids. She did one for the crown and then one for the little knot that she had in the back.
Mm-hmm.
But that was unusual for her to have long hair. That may be of one thing that my husband noticed about me when we first started dating, was that I had long hair too. So those are most of the things now, and I did want to mention that the Athens News for Monday had this section on my sister's place. You know, that's the shelter for battered women.
Mm-hmm.
A place where they can be safe and get away from domestic violence here in Athens. It says promoting peace and love, and it's a section in this Monday's Athens News that has a number of articles about that, and I'm hoping to go up to Columbus on October 7th to the statewide Coalition for Battered Women, which is called Action Ohio, mm-hmm. and maybe get capture something on tape for my program.
Yeah.
Because the speaker is going to talk about, are we ready for a woman president? Well, I don't know, but of course Hillary Clinton is out there, and there are other women too. Mm-hmm. Who knows when we might have a woman president?
Yeah. Have you
surely in your lifetime, sometime.
I hope so. That'd be interesting to see for sure. Have you heard about the speech that Emma Watson gave at the UN Assembly for Gender Equality?
No. Who was it again who gave the speech?
Emma Watson. She's the actress
okay.
from Harry Potter.
Oh, yes. I saw all the Harry Potter movies, and she's quite a gal, isn't she?
Yeah, she gave a really beautiful speech about a movement called He for She that she's very active in. So you should watch it if you get the chance. Wonderful.
Yeah, that was, and I noticed in today's Post for September 23rd that Grant Stover wrote a sort of a little article about the march itself. Mm-hmm. I guess he was one of the people who went to the march.
In New York?
In New York, mm-hmm. On Sunday, wasn't it? I think it was on Sunday.
I think so.
I don't remember having seen anything in the news much, but there was a Diane Rehm show today on radio, was about climate change.
Yeah.
And so she had, a group of people from various parts of the political spectrum who talked about the question of climate change and what might be done about it. And one of the people mentioned that there was a woman who had come from Georgia on one of the buses because they had something like 200 buses. I don't know, a lot of buses that came from different parts of the United States to the big rally Sunday afternoon on climate change. And I'm quite an interested environmentalist, so I was wishing him well and kind of wishing I could be there, but
yeah.
my time for, I guess it was at least a 14-hour trip. It must have been longer than 14 hours from Georgia to New York, because it's almost 12 hours from Ohio to New York, when I've driven it anyway, from here,
From Athens?
from Athens.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to New York from Canton, where you
Yeah,
live?
I actually spent the summer there, the
Oh,
whole
did you?
summer. Yeah, I had
The
an
whole
internship.
summer.
Mhm.
Wonderful. What was the internship?
It was with a fashion photographer who's
Uh-huh.
in, her studio's in Manhattan, and she does a lot of campaigns and beauty and cosmetics and hair things and things like that. So
Right. Well, that would be so exciting to have an internship like that.
it was.
Well, we've been talking on and on. I've done most of the talking, I'm afraid. But have you got some words of wisdom for us? You're a graduating senior this year.
Putting me on the spot here. I would just say I was very attracted to your personality when I first saw you, because I feel like you're very true to yourself. And like you said, I liked your hair and your necklace, and I thought there were very unique aspects about you. So
That's very kind. You know, I'm just starting my 9th year here. I was adding it up. I started in 2006 doing Women Today and Yesterday. And so this is a sort of a time for reflection on me. And I very much appreciate your coming today.
thank you for having me.
Meghan Shamblen is a senior at Ohio University and a specialist in photography, and she's been my guest today on Women Today and Yesterday.